Heroes of the City Man, pages 126 to 133. Enraged Love, books 18 to 21. News of Patroclus' death and Hector's seizure of Achilles' armor devastates Achilles. A black cloud of grief came shrouding over Achilles, both hands clawing the ground for soot and filth. He poured it over his head, fouled his handsome face, and black ashes settled into his fresh, clean war shirt. Overpowered in all of his power, sprawled in the dust, Achilles lay there fallen. This description is patterned on earlier descriptions of death. Death descends over the eyes of men struck in battle, and they fall to couple with the dust. Patroclus was impersonating Achilles when he died. Now the original Achilles falls in a kind of symbolic death. Achilles is not merely sympathizing with his friend. He knows it is returned to the battle and his death is imminent. Eerily, Achilles' slave women gather around him, beating their breasts as if mourning for their master rather than their master's friend. Achilles dies. The Achilles that rises from the grave of mourning is the same and yet different. Grief is only part of Achilles' reaction. He is also enraged as he has been throughout the story, but now his rage is turned toward Hector and the Trojans. In fact, grief and rage are indistinguishable in Achilles. Earlier, he lost the will to fight because of Agamemnon's treatment, but now his only purpose for living is to take vengeance upon Hector. He now recognizes that his anger has cost Patroclus his life. If he had not been sitting by the ships, a useless dead weight on the good green earth, he could have protected his friend. Seeing the effects of his rage against Agamemnon, he wishes that strife could die from the lives of gods and men, and anger that drives the sanest man to flare in outrage. But these are the words of an outraged man who is intent on perpetuating strife by taking vengeance. That he is still operating by the heroic ethic is evident, for he fully commits himself in glory. I'll lie in peace once I've gone down to death, but now for the moment let me seize great glory. Phylos has not only turned his rage to Hector, it has revived his lust for Cleos. Meanwhile, the Trojans gather for council. Achilles has been standing in the Greek camp giving out a great war cry. Merely by his cry and by raising the prospect of his return to battle, he has driven the Trojans into panic. In the council, Polydamas speaks first, and like the Greek Thersites in Book 2, urges the Trojans to retreat to the city before dawn. He realizes that Achilles' rage will never rest content to fight it out in the no man's land of the battlefield. He will fight for our wives, for Troy itself. Behind the strong walls of Troy they will be safe. Not even his fury will let him crash our gates. This is sound advice, but Hector treats it with contempt. Aren't you being sick of being caged inside those walls? Troy is already being plundered, for the Trojans have had to strip down their treasures to support their defensive war. He implies that the other Trojans are cowards, insisting that I, for one, I'll never run from his grim assault. But Hector will later do precisely that. The Trojans assent to Hector's strategy, for Athena has swept away their senses. But their senses have already been swept away by the heroic ideal that grips them. Acting as a hero in his passion for glory, Hector dooms himself and his city. Hector does not want to feel the shame, the eidos, that comes from being a coward, but he neglects the other aspect of his eidos, the need to pity and protect those who remain in the city, the wisdom that retreats to fight another day. Hera sends Iris to urge Achilles back to the battlefield, warning him that the Trojans are trying to capture the body of Patroclus in order to cut off his head and stake it by the city. Yours is shame will be yours if your comrade's corpse goes down to the dead defiled, she tells him. Achilles' anger concerning the threat to Patroclus' body will later be expressed in his mistreatment of Hector's. Achilles objects that he has no armor, and Thetis promptly seeks out Hephaestus, the smithy god, to forge a new set. This is one of the great illustrations of Homer's free use of a type scene. With Achilles ready to return to battle, we expect an arming scene, and do we ever get an arming scene? The description of the shield alone occupies a large part of Book 18. This great expansion of the arming scene is like using italics. Homer signals that this arming scene is the climax of the whole epic. Achilles is no ordinary warrior, and this is no ordinary shield. It is covered with intricate scenes that depict a world of gorgeous immortal work. An entire world in bronze. It includes the sun, moon, and some of the major constellations. And its outermost rim is encircled by the ocean. which surrounds the earth in Greek cosmology. Within this cosmic setting are scenes from two cities. The first is a city at peace. Within it there are weddings, processions, and dances, a court, and markets. The second city is under siege, as is Troy, but the city refuses to surrender, just as Hector has refused to retreat. Besiegers and besieged struggle at a riverbank, foreshadowing Achilles' later slaughter of Trojans in the river. Strife, havoc, and death join in and leave the land scattered with corpses. In addition to the peaceful city, the Shield contains other scenes of what Simone Weil call the brief evocations of peace, in the midst of the relentless mayhem of war that dominates the Iliad. A farmer plowing a field, the harvest of a king's grain field, girls and boys gathering grapes from a vineyard. Above all, there is a dancing circle. Here young boys and girls, beauties courted with costly gifts of oxen, danced and danced. Linking their arms, gripping each other's wrist, a breathless crowd stood round them struck with joy, and through them a pair of tumblers dashed and sprang, whirling and leaping handsprings leading out in the dance. Contemporary popular dance is often a highly individual affair. John Travolta can gyrate around the dance floor whether or not anyone else is there. Each dancer shows off his stuff, lost in his own world, turning everyone else into a spectator. Folk dancing, by contrast, is a communal event, and thus a common image of social harmony and peace. Each dancer has his unique place in the dance, and there are leaders and followers. Arm in arm and hand in hand, individual dancers are linked together into a greater whole. But the evocation of peace has some ironic twists. In the peaceful city, two men are quarreling over the blood price for a kinsman just murdered, while the elders sit in a sacred circle, judging the case. It is significant that, unlike Achilles, the men contending in court are not pursuing vengeance by the sword, but fighting with words and arguments, the weapons of the city. They have subordinated their rage to the judgment of elders, something that Achilles had refused to do. More generally, the Shield shows that violent death has as much a place in the city as on the battlefield. Dancers there may be, but some citizens do not follow the choreography. Later, Homer describes a scene of the cattle rumbling from the farmyard to pasture. It is a bucolic scene as the animals go along a rippling brook along the swaying reeds, yet it is interpreted by the attack of a pair of lions who drag off one of the bulls, gulp down the guts and black pooling blood, and fight off the herdsmen and gods who try to intervene. Troy's comparative peace has been shattered by the onrush of savage Greeks who tear Trojans like lions tearing prey. Some commentators on the Iliad suggest that the Shield depicts an ideal world, but this is not the case. It depicts a world as it is, with its beauties and harmonies as well as its dangers and cruelties. Homer, however, cannot imagine any other world, and this is what infuses a worldview of the poem with despair and resignation. There is no vision of a world beyond strife. Peace and war lie side by side, both equally essential. At best, strife and murder can be subordinated to the rule of law, but Homer has no hope for a new city that descends from heaven, in which only righteousness and peace will dwell. Even the most serene evocations of peace, we should remember, are forged on a weapon of war. When Thetis delivers the armor to Achilles, its glory is so great that none can look at it. Dressed in it, Achilles seems a glorious god, blazing forth, ready to fight alongside Agamemnon. Their reconciliation is hardly satisfying, nor does it make Achilles a more appealing character. Though earlier he had professed to love Briseis with all his heart, he now seems to dismiss her entirely. Agamemnon, was it better for both of us after all, for you and me to rage at each other, raked by anguish, consumed by heartsick strife, all for a girl, as opposed to something really important? Homer says that the Achaeans rejoice that Achilles is swearing off his rage, but this is not quite true. Rather than giving up his anguish and anger, he intends only to beat it down by force. In fact, he has not forsworn his rage, he has only directed it to a new object. Agamemnon, for his part, refuses to accept blame, saying in essence, the gods made me do it. In the war camp, where only heroes live, this is the only possible kind of reconciliation. Achilles and Agamemnon agree to fight together. They will never, we can be sure, dance together. Achilles is ready for battle, but Odysseus reminds him that an army needs to eat and urges him to take a break for a meal. Since it involves a sacrificial shedding of blood, a feast will also be an opportunity to seal his renewed friendship with Agamemnon as a peace offering. Let Agamemnon present you a lavish feast in his tents, so you won't lack your just deserts at last. Agamemnon agrees. We can seal our binding oaths in blood. Achilles will have none of it. In some of the most chilling lines in the poem, he makes clear that he is interested in a different kind of feast, a different slaughter, a different sacrifice. You talk of food. I have no taste for food. What I really crave is slaughter and blood and the choking groans of men. Even after Agamemnon has delivered the promised gifts, swearing to Zeus that he has not slept with her, Achilles is not pacified. No comfort could reach the fighter's heart till he went striding into the jaws of bloody war. Good thing he has sworn off his rage. Books 20 to 22, the Aristeia of Achilles, have an intricate arrangement. At the beginning of Book 20, Zeus holds council and urges the gods to interfere with the battle. The gods make a tremendous ruckus, but when they get to Earth, they do nothing. Then Achilles meets Aeneas and Hector in succession, but both are rescued by gods before being killed. Books 21 to 22 follow a similar pattern. Achilles fights the river god Scamander, and this spurs the other gods to join in as they had threatened to in Book 20. Achilles then fights Agenor and Hector in battles that mirror each other. Both Agenor and Hector deliberate about whether to face Achilles before deciding to fight. In both battles, a god intervenes. Apollo rescues Agenor by taking on the appearance of Agenor and running away so that Achilles pursues him. While Hector is, like the false Agenor, running from Achilles, Athena helps Achilles by taking the form of Hector's brother and urging him to stand and fight. Thus, Books 20 to 22 are organized in parallel panels. Book 20, gods threaten to fight. Achilles versus Aeneas, God intervenes to end fight. Achilles versus Hector, God intervenes to end fight. Books 21 to 22, gods fight. Achilles versus Agenor, Apollo tricks Agenor. Achilles versus Hector, Athena tricks Hector. Zeus's main goal in sending the gods into battle is to prevent Achilles from raising the walls, which fate has decreed Achilles will not destroy. Without the gods helping the Trojans, Achilles will win too easily. Symbolically, the intervention of the gods raises the battle to cosmic proportions. Not only Greeks and Trojans, but the whole universe fights before the walls of Troy in a great pagan Armageddon. No wonder the whole world quaked, as it does in Hesiod's description of Zeus's battle with the Titans. Some of the exploits of the gods and goddesses appear humorous. Achilles is a terror on the field, but the catfights between Athena and Aphrodite and Hera and Artemis, which ends with Artemis running back to Daddy Zeus, are hard to take seriously. The gods cannot really be terrifying or terrified, for they risk nothing when they enter the fray. Deathless gods cannot be heroic. We have seen many warriors in battle up to this point, but none like Achilles. His butchery has an almost religious power to it, as he spears Hippodamus like some bull that chokes and grunts when the young boys drag him round the lord of Hellas' shrine. Homer constructs a horrifying epic simile to capture the power of this charge. Over against Aeneas came Achilles, rearing like some lion out on a rampage, and a whole town of men has geared for the hunt to cut him down. But at first he lopes along, all contempt, till one of his fast young hunters spears him. Then, crouched for attack, his jaws gaping, over his teeth the foam breaks out. Deep in his chest the brave heart groans. He lashes his ribs, his flanks, and hips with his tail. He whips himself into fighting fury. Eyes glaring, hurls himself head on. Kill one of the men or die. Go down himself at the first lethal charge. Deeply wounded when Hector plunged his spear into Patroclus, Achilles now groans and glares against his attacker. Like the predator, Achilles shows no mercy to his victims. When Troas grasps Achilles' knees and pleads for mercy. He'd no idea, thinking Achilles could be swayed. Here was a man not sweet at heart, not kind. No, he was raging, wild as Troas grasped his knees. Desperate, begging, Achilles slit open his liver. He storms through the Trojan camp, like inhuman fire, raging on through the mountain gorges, splinter dry, setting ablaze big stands of timber, chaos of fire. He is no longer a man, he is an elemental force of nature, relentless as death itself. Before Achilles, the Trojans retreat behind the walls of their city. Hector alone remains outside, watching as the fire spreads across the fields.